while I'll get to introduce our second featured reader, Nancy Miller Gomez. And Nancy is the author of Inconsolable Objects by Yes Yes Books and Punishment by in the Rattle Chapbook series. Her work has appeared in Best American Poetry, Best New Poets, Prairie Schooner, Lit Hub, the Adroit Journal, New Ohio Review, The Rumpus, Rattle, Verse Daily, and more. She received a special mention in the 2023 Pushcart Prize anthology. Beyond her writing, Nancy co-founded an organization that brings poetry workshops to incarcerated individuals and has taught poetry in prisons, jails, and juvenile halls. She lives in Northern California with her family and currently serves as the Poet Laureate of Santa Cruz County. And Nancy, you of course know a little bit of what's coming, so here is my reflection on your work. There is a silent kind of thread in these poems of unspoken things that are all the more present. It's there in the menacing way men can exert power over women, which is both a subversion of and a retribution for the power men think women have over them. It's there in the give me a smile of the photographer, but also in the violence that seems to be brewing in this hand grenade of a girl, as it says in the poem Snapshot. It's there in the lingering focus on appearance, clothes, bodies. These poems celebrate the unsaid, the invisible, that which, like a Victorian mother, hides in the background but wields its power nonetheless. Like in the poem How to Forget, where we follow all the outward markings of a tragedy and yet don't know for sure what happened. As if to say, that is not what matters. The darkness at the center is just that. It gets its shape and presence from what surrounds it, what breathes life into it, filling it with meaning. And Nancy, of course, the same rather easy question for you. How can poetry change the world?
Um, it's such an important question. And first of all, Mila, thank you for having me here. Um, I'm I'm delighted uh, to be participating. Um, I'm going to tackle this question a little differently. I so appreciated Dorcia's response that we have to act now, and poetry is a force, is one of many forces that we can bring to bear to influence and impact the world around us. And I so agree with that. But I think poetry is also, it's also something that impacts the individual, and so profoundly that in my experience, the way poetry can change the world is that it can change humans. It can change a person. It can change the way they move through the world. It can help them see things in a different way. It can help them grapple with tragedy and trauma. It can help them find words to express the inexpressible. And in so giving language to those feelings that we all carry around inside us of despair and loneliness and anxiety and terror, by giving form and language to that, we're able to understand it not only in ourselves but share it with others and establish a commonality and a connection with other humans, so that we can see each other in a more kind and benevolent light, and we can embody forgiveness and compassion. And I think poetry does that better than anything else, because there are no rules. And so when you're trying to get at saying something that is truly so terrible that there are no ways to describe it, or so beautiful that there are no other ways to describe it, poetry gives us that language, that, you know, where we can figure out how to get closer to being able to express the inexpressible. And I really think firsthand, I see it in my work in the jails and the prisons, and with at-risk youth, that when you give people permission to tap into those feelings and express themselves, It really does help them move forward in their lives. It gives them a place to put the anger, to put the fear, to put all of those other emotions that might come out in negative ways. And I also think, as I said, it connects us. Um, so that's how I think poetry changes the world. I know it has changed me. I came to poetry, somewhat. I think that a lot of us come to poetry damaged, and poetry helps us heal. It helps us grow. It helps us forgive not only other people, but ourselves. And um, that's how I think poetry can change the world. And not just as a mode of expression, but as a mode of self-realization.
Wow.
And um, so I
Wow. Thanks. And I love that, ever since starting to ask this question, you get all these, it's like do you know the kaleidoscope? I'm not sure if it translates into English, but you get all these different perspectives that are all part of this whole, and they're all true and valid. So thank you so much for that. And with that, of course, we would love to hear some of your poems.
Okay then. Well, I had sent in a little stack of some poems I was going to read, but I kind of want to shift it up a little bit in response to some of the poems that Dorcia read. Um, uh, I think I would like to actually start with, because I love that poem, Ghost Talker, so much, Dorcia. It's so beautiful. So I'd like to start with a poem called The Invisible Mother, um, which is based on photographs that were taken during the Victorian age, um, where the mother would be in the picture holding the children, but they would drape her in a blanket or some fabric in order to obscure her, to literally erase her from the picture. And I just found it so disturbing. The ultimate act of erasure. So I'm going to share with you a couple of these pictures just because I think in this case, don't know if you can see that. Can you see that, everybody?
Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah. So, this is, they would just throw a blanket over her head. She'd be in the picture. Anyway, I was so disturbed by these pictures. And I saw it as like the ultimate leaping off point, the ultimate metaphor for how women have traditionally been erased throughout history. Um, this is called The Invisible Mother. And it begins with an epigraph about the photographs. In the Victorian era, young children were photographed with their mother present, but hidden. Wikipedia. The mother's shape, draped in dark cloth, takes on the properties of a chair, a curtain, a cloak. She becomes a living field of fabric, a blank screen, an erasure. Lint gathers in her eyes and the corners of her mouth. She is the rustling in the room, the empty place where dust gathers. Her heart is made of cobwebs, her words glued to the roof of her mouth. No one sees her chin quivering like a small bird. She has folded her sorrows into napkins placed at a table set for her children. They feast until nothing is left but her absence. Her fingers tap out time, measuring seconds. She is a forgotten thought, a lamp, a stage, a station of the cross. She bears it silently, this weight, her babies propped across her motionless body. She wears the finery of their bones to mask her naked face. She is counterbalance, stanchion, a breathing pillar of brocade, the space where she begins and ends, debated endlessly in velvet. Thank you. I'm going to read the first poem in my collection, Inconsolable Objects. because it was so beautifully referred to in Mila's introduction, which I loved. Snapshot. I was a hand grenade of a girl, vacuum packed into a dress that bound my body like a bandage, staunching a wound. My arms were cinched in tourniquets of tulle, my throat choked in a rage of lace. I'd hacked my hair into chaos, kept it ragged and short, kept my fists clenched in the fuselage of my lap. My eyes, two foxholes, no light escaped. My lips stretched across my face like a tripwire. The man with the camera said, "You can do better. Give me a smile." I set my mouth into the look I've kept all these years. That's still me in the photo, waiting to pull the pin. So I grew up in Kansas, and a lot of my poems are poems of place, um, because especially since this is my first full-length collection, there's all the obligatory childhood poems. So I will share a couple of those. Tilt-a-whirl. It was a hot day in Paola, Kansas. The rides were banging around empty as we moved through the carnival music and catcalls. At the Tilt-a-whirl, we were the only ones. My big sister chose our carriage carefully, walking a full circle until she stopped. The ride operator didn't take his eyes off her. Long, dark hair and amber eyes ringed like the golden interior of a newly felled pine. She didn't seem to notice him lingering as he checked the lap bar, and my sister asked in her sweetest, most innocent, or maybe not so innocent voice, "Can we have a long ride, please, mister?" When he sat back down at the joystick, he made a show of lighting his smoke while the cage of his face settled into a smile I would one day learn to recognize. And those dizzying red teacups began to spin my sister and me into woozy amusement. We forgot the man, the heat, our thighs sticking to the vinyl seats, our bodies glued together in a centrifugal blur of happiness beneath a red metal canopy as we picked up speed and started to laugh, our heads thrown back, mouths open, the fabric of my sister's shirt clinging to the swinging globes of her breasts as we went faster and faster, though by then we had begun to scream, "Stop! Please stop!" until our voices grew hoarse beneath the clattering pivots and dips, the air filling with diesel and cigarettes, and the man at the control stick waiting for us to spin toward him again. And each time he cocked his hand as if sighting prey down the barrel of a gun. So here's another little Kansas poem, light little Kansas poem. Resurrection. When I was 5, my brother convinced me to perform mouth to mouth on a catfish floating belly up in the scum that gathered in the lake behind our house. He said I had the power to bring it back, though it was my choice. I followed his directions, leaned over the dock, pressed my lips against the stiff ridge of its mouth while keeping its bloated body submerged beneath the oily sheen, and began to breathe in and out as I opened and closed the bony folds of its gills. At first, my brother held my ankles to steady me so I wouldn't fall off the dock. I kept breathing in through my nose, sting of creosote and pond rot, and out through my mouth, a soft exhale of prayer. You already know I did not bring the fish back to life, though it wasn't for lack of trying. I kept breathing into that dark opening long after my brother said to quit, Long after he got bored and wandered off, and the setting sun bathed the brackish water in gold, I kept breathing in and out long after the night cooled and the stars rose, and my mother found me asleep on the dock, her voice calling me back from that place where the fish turned its rapturous eyes away from the moon and dove back to its sanctuary of darkness. So, I often am inspired to write poems based on news articles or articles and magazines that I read because I'm a voracious reader. And prior to our last election, I used to read the news a lot. And subsequently, I've stopped reading the news. I go straight to the New York Times cooking section because it's safe there, right? I don't want to read about any of the other stuff that's going on. I'm sorry. I have to stick my head in the sand. But there was this wonderful article in the New York Times that talked about how we are able to manipulate our memories in order to serve us as we move forward in our lives. How we can go back and rethink about something differently. And I thought, wow, that's so wonderful. So this is a poem that plays with that concept, that idea. How to forget. I am lining my memories up against the wall. They are begging me for reprieve. Here is the night I found you on the floor folded like laundry. Here are the bloody towels, the smell of ammonia and rotting fruit. Once I was a wife. Now I am a wilderness. I am the grove of aspens. All that's left of you are candle stubs and carpet stains. All your goodbyes have turned into horses. They are grazing peacefully. Your words are blades of grass. Our last argument, a pasture dotted with poppies. That night, I watched you wash your bruised hands in the sink. Now, I see two fish diving into a stream. I am remembering the last time we spoke. I have turned it into a holiday, marked it on the calendar with an asterisk, a day to eat cake, a day to enter the cellar and retrieve the special vintage with its sweet notes of smoke and honey, lush on the tongue, easy to swallow. The golden-crowned sparrows have returned from their long summer singing of loss. 3 notes, one for the knife, one for the cut, one for all I have forgotten. So this next poem is one that was inspired by my teaching in the prisons and the jails. And normally, when I teach a workshop in the jail, I am escorted into a classroom, and then the participants are escorted into the classroom by a correctional officer, and they're dropped off with me, and I teach my class, and then when my class is over, I push a little button and the correctional officer comes back and escorts the men or the women back to their jail cell. And there was a brief period of time at the Santa Cruz County Jail where they had this program called the Code 4 program, where they identified a group of men who were soon to be released back into our community. And they created this program where they were just bathing them in support services to help them thrive when they were back into the community. And so they were giving them yoga classes and anger management classes and financial management classes and parenting classes. And they asked me if I would teach a poetry class. And of course I said yes, because what more do you need to thrive in life, right? And is than poetry. So, but the interesting thing about this class is it took place right in their cell block unit, not in a classroom. So I would be escorted into their cell block where they actually lived by a correctional officer who would stay with me during the workshop. And of course, I made him write because you can't just sit there and watch us. That would be really weird, right? And it was this beautiful experience. And this poem came out of that. It's called Growing Apples in the County Jail. There is big excitement in C Block today. On the windowsill, in a plastic ice cream cup, a little plant is growing. This is all the men want to talk about. How an apple seed germinated in a crack of damp concrete. How they tore open tea bags to collect the leaves, bleached them in water, then laid the sprout onto the bed made of Lipton. How this finger of spring dug one delicate root down into the dark fannings, and now two small sleeves of green are pushing out from the emerging tip. The men are tipsy with this miracle. Each morning, one by one, they go to the window and check the progress of the struggling plant. All through the day, they return to stand over the seedling and whisper. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you so much.